The witch's haze. Scholarly understanding is the identification of someone who goes against the church's point of view. That the nature of this particular version of ostracization is the idea of the Savior's complex, that due to scriptural recreations of biblical text, there has to be a defining between one following blindly and the other self-indulgently creating their own purpose. But if we are to judge that which is the spiritual value of humanity, we are to accept the flaws and imperfection that comes along with free spirit, free will, as given to us by said ostracizer. It is of no confusion that they chose witchery as their target, since the nature of rebellion is at the key point of their investigation into followers. If the church of the past had had their way, the Inquisition would be indoctrination or death. In truth, they think they are progressing, but when one is not allowed to understand the benefit of existence, like Lilith, they will continue to make mistakes and thus continue to need a sheep herder. And so they become their own relevant nature of religion. They become their own blockage and salvation, meaning they can then determine the value of reach. But what becomes of humanity when it is a resource denied to you but accepted by those who submit? Truly, in the occult nature of submission, one has to submit in order for them to be beyond the need to submit again. As the saying goes, you must learn to be like the chicken or the wolf in order for you to understand their role, predator or prey. But in the witch's understanding, this was an attack against their being, since the church lacked education to create anything other than superficial material. They wanted the material of their all-living deity, and sadly this upset the balance, when outsiders could do it, and those inside could not. But once again you had a cleanup crew that tried to explain unusual mental or physical disciplines from a natural point of view, as in a mistaken version of conduct or drug use or mental illness. The idea of self-righteous undermining. All of these were used as support for the needs of the hazing. Even in church's ceremonies, they beat the devil out of you before ever meeting him. This is a version of mind control, and to try and keep them on the straight and narrow, but it keeps blinders on you for the rest of existence, because it doesn't judge you as you, or them as them, but you as a group. The occult cares not for the trials you go through. As the saying goes, you must go through hell to get to heaven. True, for you must go through strife, to understand it, to avoid it. So what is the church's beef with witches? There was none. Only in the idea of craft and devil worshipping did they join them together to make it more cynical and mischief-making, to make it easier to ostracize those who would disagree. Is this wrong? Is this immoral? Is this without any form of redemption? We don't care. The term occult means you will go against the balances that create imbalance, meaning those who don't get the message written on ancient wall. You will always be on the wrong side of those who don't get the message, because they want everyone to be on the same page, but they don't know how to make the paper, and that's where witches come in. Witches help them understand their Even in ancient times, kings and queens used the diverse arts and stood by them as if they were the laws under heaven, and yet turned against them when they wanted to become the king or queen, or when the odds weren't in their favor. The Vatican is an example of heaven on earth. It's the veil to begin again, the idea of Eden. But ask yourself once again, why does Eden have a fence around it? Because it's indoctrination. Why the witch's haze? Because women were seen as underlings. Women weren't seen as having the capacity to learn. And later they were indoctrinated as nurses, then becoming nuns, temple mini-priestesses. Even the Catholic Church once in time used the word priestess to explain their role and their way. But today it's about control. Today it's about understanding. The greater message or veil. And this is where the falsehood of occult knowledge and the grandness of occult knowledge battle against one another. For the knowledge of a woman, born with both sides of the educational ladder, without even having to take part in the church's idea of original sin. But what's the extent of this hazing? Individuals chosen for their status and their way of acting, to be judged by the ruling class as afflicted by malice, not the devil, but simply you didn't fit in. But where does that put witchcraft and the magic of it? That's a lesser understanding, not a higher. A higher is that the churches wanted what you had. But this belongs to the mage arts. Witchery is merely a copy of this awareness. Now, those of many future women as well as past women will disagree, but that's because of their own moral need to turn it into a conflict of male and female nature. But we care not for this. Who are we? Mage, magus, magi, magistry. So, when do we tell our side of the story? Wolf people. Werewolf. The word comes from the word wer, a word being a version of the moon, the skin of the moon, so nightly wolf. Here's where the idea of the werewolf went 5 ways, but we will only explore 3 here. The druid chemical, the nature of the skinwalker, and the history of the idea of deitism being wolves. The nature of the werewolf is in druid lore, a type of medicine, created to bring out the animalistic side of humanity, so they become what they try to kill. In Egyptian models, it is based on the guardian of the dead, Anubis, which is a mistake in the idea of the creation of the word of wolf. The idea of Ra is the sun, and Osiris was considered the rainbow gateway to that. And so Anubis was considered the moon, which isn't exact, but how it was framed. The nature of the character of the dog/wolf, the jackal, is basically the attribution of a wolf and dog. They got the idea from the Norse underworld guardian, the ice wolf Fenris, not Garm. The nature of the druid model is based on the dragon, being the outer connection to Merlin's blade Excalibur, and the falcon, which is a teacher to the truth of the Egyptian model, early Sumerian, and Greek and Roman. Falcon was the watchful eye over. Werewolves were also said to contain the model of chimera, which were also seen as a byproduct of wolf. In nature, when one decides to take over, nature must create something to supplement that, something that was lost. To take from one area is to take from another and shifting it. So the same was said by those who followed the nature of wolf. In the end, even on those who wear their skin, they consider themselves to be a tribe to wolves. And when the moon came full, this mental attunement would turn them into cannibals, the idea of Wendigos, that of a human being changed, because of an irregular act in nature. It's based in 2 cultures, Norse and Germanic. However, in our art, in The Secret of the Werewolf, we touch upon the closeness between the were factor and the curse. For the curse can create the animus nature, but the were product, even if said it can be countered by other herbs to guard or defend against werewolves, for not true, this chemical was processed by druids to turn an individual into a wolf or beast. Now, solid physical transformation would not happen unless genetically enhanced by outside versions of wolf blood extract. Hence the reason why people believed if you got bit, you would become one, if you survived. but that also can be attributed to animals having rabies, which can affect humans, but it's not on that level yet where the ancient tribes and voodoo were. Humanity spares its knowledge between two models, the higher divine and the lesser animal instinctive side, created by the byproduct of our flesh, meaning the millions of cells coming together to form the human body. No matter how intelligent or brilliant our spirits gets to, when put into extreme harm, our bodies create that type of reaction. This is a skill that majored had advanced into control of the mindset of those who reach beyond their station. You might say it's an alchemy that perpetuates a primal extraction of human nature. The Four Horsemen. As you already know, they are statues and warriors who have been wrongly killed and then captured and used. Wizardry is the power to turn four horsemen into a channel of the veil. Because just like life and death, the seasons of the four is a power, which in wizardry can be controlled by the dragon, if nature is not dominant of that particular season. Wizardry allows us to utilize the forces of the dragon to persuade that which would be dominant, even of its own choosing, to maintain longer even if the cycle would not normally turn in that fashion. You need to understand, nature wants humanity to tell it what it wants, but humanity is not wise enough to know what it wants, and this is why it doesn't think of it as solid. Nature does not care one season over another, only what we want. And if you don't know what we want, we get nothing, we as humanity. We as wizards are controlled by the forces of the dragon, and by those forces allow us to reason the actions that take place. This is forbidden in the course of one's own desire to do it, but not forbidden for the need to offer change. Meaning, if we are doing it for parlor tricks, we are held accountable. But if done to extend life or offer change, we will not be held accountable. It's the need to do it. Always remember, wizardry is the service for another, not one's own self. Others would disagree with that, but that's because they want the role of the sorcerer. And nature views that the same it views an empty hole. For nature cares about the checks and balances for stuff that grows and stuff that dies, while magic cares for the needs of the system connected to these checks and balances. So, like an errant father that wants the kid to get into game, if the kid has proven a good track record, the kid will get in. But if the father wants him in just to see him play, it will not happen. Nature is not about the game, the win or the loss, or the kid or the father, but the circumstances about all the field. Because that is the ground on which the universe tests what happens next. The Four Horsemen are the ideology of what happens when we unleash all those things that humanity fears. But within that fear, that inner version of hell, comes the opposite side, heaven. I'm not saying to unleash one to gain the other, but what keeps one and the other in balance. That is the nature of the Four Horsemen. Banshi. Much like the version of the Muse, the Banshi is along the same lines, but the mirror of yourself. The purpose of the Banshi is not romanticized, it's more along the lines of the disposition of your own spirit, when you feel you are outside of yourself. It's achieved only in certain cultures, in fact, as those cultures brought it out of them seeing it. Similar as the Furies, they heat up your mind until it's driven into madness, until you admit you are wrong or you die in the process. Banshee won't kill you, but it can reach a point where you won't be able to feel. Their flesh will feel nothing but cold, even though it's your own mind doing it. Regardless of your body heat, when you reach the nature of the ethereal gateway, The emptiness of existence describes a cold beyond a cold. The cold of space being second-rate compared to it. The nature of this is a self-inflicted version of absence. Once again, there's a secret to this, which can't be given here, but it's the secret to this version of awakening. Succubus. There is no incubus. That was created as a word later on and not by one of the occult. Once again, I said there's no such thing as incubus. They are the same female idea. The status of the high witch named as the Dark Witch establishes a connection with the deities, which are the harnesser of physical powers, the ethereal version of both sex magic and a version of the higher arts. A succubi is not necessarily a good or bad thing. The term just means drainer, and in the aspect of draining it chooses to take the aspect of strength, of the weaker, for the fact they aren't as dedicated to the ritual. Meaning they will be cast out of the overall design and removed of the magic, because they are not able to maintain that charge or essence. The idea is the darker arts want commitment, and in women that commitment is energy and essence. And the stronger the energy and essence, the stronger the veils around can be focused by the witch or a higher version of magus as witch. I'm not saying a witch stays a witch when a magus, but that the magus is open to the female design. Males can take on the witch education, but they will not be of that design or follow their fashioning of being. Get over the Wiccan equality ideal. We're talking about pure power, registered in the Red Book, and pure power has to have no fear, otherwise it's able to be misdirected. The succubi and incubi ideal comes from a lie made into the truth. See, the first succubi was considered to be Lilith of the church, because they wanted to make her into a scapegoat for not following God. But you have to remember that Lilith had free will, and God put no conditions or restrictions on her, and she was given both sides of the coin. Many believe if women were dominant, men would be subservient, and men wouldn't want sex, and women would be like the Amazonians, and want the same thing as men. But look at lesbian culture or other female-dominant culture. They are trying to possess the male role. That isn't wrong and it's natural, but they are then trying to walk into the role they claim they were not part of. The succubi was then created as idea of turning men or women away from their nature and turn them into a slave of the devil. Succi comes from the nature of channel, and cubi comes from the nature of four. So we have the channel 4, meaning 4 elements. Always follow the word. The taboo nature of sexual rituals never existed. In all these other places and times, sex came before any other version of control. Even the church is a religious byproduct. None was brought in order to join the males. None as a word being coming from the Egyptian version of heaven. So what is the nature of the succubi? It's a test of the higher level of female and male endurance, not in sex, but in the nature of why. So it can infuse the body, so the body can then light that inner candle that then separates both the animal and mindset / genius and spin them into the same creature, so they can then enhance the other instead of separating them. Because the mind, body and spirit must work as one if we are to understand the ancient secrets of the world. Others would try and say we can understand it through our brilliance and sharing of biblical texts. But we can't. We have too many fighting over control, but none showing how to use it. Why would this matter? In the occult we have a stage called the Mistress, which is above Deve and is about getting in touch with Lilith.